Moving forward, we have the first panel discussion ready now. So the panel discussion will be focusing on investment opportunities in Mongolia's energy sector. The session will be chaired by Sofia Maia, Head of Country Transition Research at the Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Sofia brings a global perspective on the clean energy transition in emerging markets. Joining here, we have His Excellency Dorjkhand, Deputy Prime Minister of Mongolia, and Randolph Koppa, Chairman of Trade and Development Bank of Mongolia, representing Mongolia's leading financial institution. And lastly, we have Andrew Brown, President of Delphos, a firm specializing in structuring impact investment across the frontier in emerging markets. Please welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sofia. I lead the strategic research for energy transition focused in emerging markets for BloombergNEF. And today I have the pleasure, the honor to be moderating this panel here to talk about opportunities that Mongolia presents for attracting investment in the energy transition, and also to touch base on some of the main challenges of this capital attraction in the country. So for that, we brought some experienced guests. So thank you very much for being here. And I'd like to kick off this conversation with a question for you, Mr. Dorjkhand, because we have seen that Mongolia has a renewable energy target to reach 30% of the installed capacity from renewables in 2030. But so far, the country is still very reliable on coal generation, for example. But as my other colleagues here have made insightful presentations, we were able to see the importance and also the opportunities that the country presents in terms of abundant renewable resources. So my first question would be how is the government supporting such stakeholders towards the deployment of renewable energy projects?
Thank you. Let me be very, very open that this is actually quite a practical approach that we have made, is because Mongolia is very rich of resources, especially underground. It's coal firing. The thermal coal is maybe one of the richest. But unfortunately, no one funding it because 2014, since 2014, the Paris Agreement has been issued. And then as a result, I think in China has been joined this Paris Agreement 2019. And so in the reality, no one is funding it. And everyone is actually moving toward green energy funding. And that was the case. And as Jamba clearly mentioned, that Mongolian, the energy source is mainly from this coal-firing power plants, and it's like more than 90% today. So what the government has decided is that, okay, let me be very practical. Look, we have also resource of the renewables, because the land is very big, it's huge, it's like a number 17. And we actually live on a very high altitude, which means our wind is very strong, very strong. And the sun is, of course, it's closer to the sun, means it's more bright. And so energy efficiency is good. And we do have more than 320 days of sun per year. So the resource is huge. Then still, the capacity is very low. And demand in Mongolia locally is very small, So that's why we actually initiated that, okay, let's do the reforms in the energy sector. And as we mentioned that, we have established this grand coalition government. This is the first time has happened in the history of Mongolian democracy over 35 years, We have increased the number of the seats in the parliament. And we have introduced the election law. We have introduced this proportional element of the election law. As a result, the parliament is very solid. And we do have a parliamentarian democracy, which is quite a strong democracy we do have, right? So the first reform we have agreed within the government is that let's do some change in the energy sector, because the energy sector is supposed to be a locomotive, It's supposed to be a leading sector, but unfortunately it's been stuck. And as a result, it was very difficult for us to implement other projects like housing projects or like infrastructure projects, etc. You know? So that's why the government is very much committed to reform it, and we have established National Committee on Energy Reform led by us. And as you see that, yes, there are potentials, and we actually, the first action have been taken is like to change the tariffs. And then it hasn't made like over like 5 years. 2 times have tried, and 2 governments has been dismissed, you know. So public is so hate to increase the tariff, but we have done the success. As a result, a good signal has been given to the private sector, and now I would like to mention is that yes, the government is very much committed to support this sector. It is very essential. We do have resource. Now a lot of fundings are actually available, and then only policy was missing, but now policy is on the table. Government support is there, and political very robust. The support in the history of Mongolia is now. This is the momentum, this is the window, and based on that, actually we do receive a lot of quite positive signals from investors, from not only from the local but also the foreign as well. We had a lot of meetings with, for example, these Arabian countries. Aqua Power, Mazda are actually in Mongolia. They're going to start investing like 10 gigawatts. The investment, including the green hydrogen project in Mongolia. So they actually started their surveys. At the same time, also a Chinese company is called Envision is already, we have signed, starting with 10 gigawatts, etc. You know? Today, I think we are also going to sign with other companies here. The meaning is, the market is there. The China actually is very much looking forward to buy the energy from Mongolia, clean energy. And it has been like over 25 years, they've been looking forward to it. Not only China, but also Japan. They actually initiated this, the idea is called the Asian Supergrid. Look at the Mongolia, so enormous the resource in Mongolia, and we need the energy. And then why don't we buy energy from Mongolia? That was idea has been come up, I think, decades ago. And this is still going on. So for example, now, Japan, like price of the electricity is like 26 cents per kilowatt, while the Korea is like 18 cents, and China's subsidized price is something like 6 to 7 cents, while we can export less than 3-4 cents, you know. So this is the reality, and that's why a lot of investors actually show up to Mongolia to invest, not only focus on Mongolian market, but also the Chinese market, the East Asian market. And so in this regard, the government of Mongolia has made very good deals with the Chinese authorities. In the history of the government-to-government level, we have agreed and signed and ratified by our parliament quite recently. And you might heard that based on this platform, but also the French government has been signed on Orano deals. You know, it's the uranium utilization deals 2 months ago. So the clean energy is actually the future of Mongolian the energy, you know, and every investors actually, key players actually in Mongolia and doing the business, and we are quite open for them. And so government of Mongolia is very much committed, and we're open for everyone, all the investors from foreign, but also the locals as well, and we are quite happy to generate the clean energy in the region, and happy to have everyone over there. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to bring now Andrew to the discussion, because you have been working with financial advisory in emerging markets, have already invested, raised capital in many emerging markets. So based on your experience, how would you assess Mongolia's readiness to attract investors, particularly in terms of policies, macroeconomic stability, and geographic advantages?
Great, thanks for the question. So just in terms of some context on my perspective and biases, we do a fair amount of work in Mongolia, a lot in the financial space, but we're working globally. So a couple of months ago, we placed a mini-grid equity investment in Democratic Republic of Congo, which is servicing a bunch of inside the fence mining assets, or corporate offtake in Central America for solar parks. A couple of things in terms of how I see the investment opportunity. I mean, first, all of the opening remarks were fantastic, and I agreed with much of what was said in terms of the transparency, the engagement. But I think two things that are important as you look at the macroeconomic environment and where I see the investment opportunity, one reason I wanted to come today. First, on a macro level, one thing that hasn't been mentioned, we're not at an energy conference, so I'll make the claim in case everyone doesn't know. There's a lot of talk about green economy, but something that's been happening in the last 15 years is the price of a lot of these renewable technologies have declined precipitously. Solar is now cheaper than coal globally. I mean, in the US last year, for the first time ever, more solar and wind, or there was more production from solar and wind than from coal. So even if you leave the climate green, it's just cheaper because the installed capacity went from 8 gigawatts in 2009 to 600 last year. I mean, that's insane, 30% CAGR for over 15 years. And as a result, economies of scale, it just gets cheaper to produce. And so I think that's one thing that should just be acknowledged. Specific to Mongolia, why I'm particularly interested in this piece, sort of the energy play in particular, we've done a lot of work in financials, and I think there's a lot of banks here. And I mean, a lot of international capital has gone into the banks. They're well run. I think that's why a lot of capital has gone in. Great initiatives, green bonds. But the challenge on a lot of those, basically on financials globally, is a lot of the equity gets baked into, sort of what's the exit, and a lot of the value gets baked in on an exit. What I think is compelling about crowding in international capital to this market is you can structure real asset plays, whether it's sort of an inside the fence corporate offtake, whether it's a long-term asset, where it really becomes an annuity play, even for equity investors. And so even for equity investors, it becomes sort of debt-like or fixed income-like. And that's one reason I'm very interested to see how this initiative rolls out in terms of more capital, in terms of more projects and then more capital coming into the market. And I think when you couple the legacy that Mongolian corporate sovereigns have in terms of how they've engaged with the international capital market, the transparency, the professional management, with this new economic, it's not really a new economic structure, but with this new vertical that'll be more available to international capital, I think that's one reason I'm very enthusiastic in terms of how there can be good positioning in the marketplace.
Thank you. So maybe Randolph, building on Andrew's points, what are the main challenges in attracting investment for renewable energy projects in Mongolia? And what do you think are the steps needed to overcome them?
I think you need to have a little bit of an historical perspective. Obviously, as the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, Mongolia's resources of thermal coal are vast. The historical production of electricity during let's say, the Soviet-supported era was to use that. And to be able to move into a renewable energy transition, it required money, and it had to face the fact that then, until recently, the cost of putting in renewables was not as attractive cost-wise. And Mongolia had a slower start in a lot of this respects because its development of a capital market has lagged. In other countries that went through a post-Soviet transition into a market economy, one of the first things they did was implement a second pension pillar, which would require at least the younger generation to start a tax incentive savings program, to have corporates contribute. That has not happened yet in Mongolia. Hence, we don't have pools of long-term capital to provide for the length of financing that is required for these renewable projects. And it wasn't until recently that, with the new government, that the key issue to be addressed was the tariff. Because, as was mentioned, they've tried, it always had to be pushed back. Why? Because there was sort of this populist approach, and it meant votes. So the resistance to doing that with one party in power and then another party in power was always dangerous, as you might lose the next round. Now with the coalition formed, they all decided together, let's bite the bullet, and have taken an important step to raise the tariff so that new projects, and we as a bank are looking at several with private sector support, where the PPA or the offtake agreements are priced significantly higher than they would have been before this reform. And now these projects can go forward. There are some concerns whether this policy will be sustained, but I think the reality is that the cost of producing the energy now is going to be lower with the wind and solar, so we expect it to move forward aggressively. But it's very good news. And I think another thing is almost 80% of the economy is private sector in Mongolia. Yet the heavy hand of government wanting to run things and control things is only now really beginning to loosen, especially in the energy sector. And you have to think about locations. The grid doesn't go everywhere, and you have mines that need to have a lot of energy or other developments that are in remote locations. So you have to be able to allow private agreements to be reached between the two parties, and I think the new energy policies will enable that. So I think we've seen some massive changes, and I'm also on the board of the American Chamber of Commerce, and the U.S. and Mongolia signed a transparency agreement a few years ago, which essentially said that anytime you're going to make a new law, you'll give enough consultation time, you'll have a review, you'll get feedback. That has not really always been the case, but we're seeing now with the raft of laws that are being introduced, there's a tax amendment law in which a consultation is happening almost while we speak here. There's a new energy law, there's a new investment law, et cetera, revisions going on. And there's been a lot of engagement with the public, with the international chambers and business councils alike. So we're seeing there's more engagement with the private sector than there was before.
Thank you. So, Dorjkhand, our previous colleagues have already mentioned something about hydrogen, about data centers, but I just wanted to go back to that point because right now we are seeing like a growing global uncertainty from shifting trade dynamics to the accelerating rise of AI, for example. And because of that, reliable and sustainable energy has become a top priority as well in many markets. Data centers in particular are emerging as critical infrastructure. Energy demands are pushing companies to look beyond traditional markets. And countries with abundant renewable sources like Mongolia, they can definitely take advantage of this environment. So what exactly is the government doing for Mongolia to take advantage to be like the country, also among the Belt and Road Initiative as well, like how Mongolia can be highlighted among the other markets around?
Thank you, Sofia. Very, very nice question. And yes, well, everyone knows that artificial intelligence is everywhere. It is actually getting use of the world. As a result, it is actually boosting the demand of the energy everywhere, especially the clean energy, right? And that's why what the Mongolia offers is because we do have a resource of the clean energy. And as I mentioned that, yes, we are having very good deals, for example, with Chinese authorities because market is there, 2 terawatts, the demand is there. But while the Mongolia actually is the very good place for the data centers because it's a very big land and only 3.5 million people actually living in there. And that's for the land that we can actually use only 2% of the land to grow the food, right? But the rest of the land is basically for the nomads, and it's empty. And while it is also, Mongolia is a very cold country, as you know. The Mongolian capital city is called Ulaanbaatar, is the coldest capital city in the world. Out of 12 months, 8 months is cold. So naturally, we have actually natural cooler. So cool down cost is like 40% efficient than other countries, for example. And also, Mongolia is in between Russia and China. There will be no war. And there is no earthquake and there is no tsunami, you know. And the country is democracy. It's ruled by law. In the region, we do have strongest democracy that we have strengthened like last 3-4 years, that we have changed our constitution and we've been actually changing a lot how to keep our democracy alive, you know. So the point here is that this is a good place for invest, you know. The rule of law is good. We are working on it, and democracy is very strong. And then, yes, how to make businesses, especially for data centers. It is really good place to work in there because you can save a lot of money while we have a lot of resources. The resource, basically, the energy is quite cheap. For example, here in Texas, if you establish data centers, then maybe like 8 to 14 cents per kilowatt, while we can offer less than 4 cents in Mongolia. And as I mentioned, that we have signed with the French company Oran on utilization of the uranium, and we had a talk with the US authorities how to develop our nuclear power plant in the near future. You know, that is actually going on. So basically, my country is used to be a country of the natural resources, country of the mining, but now this is the country of the energy, clean energy, you know. And that's why a lot of the mining companies, the miners, and as you know, the Bitcoin is becoming the part of this the international reserve here, so which actually boosting also those kind of the miners to operate, and they're actually very much looking forward to have a business in Mongolia. And now we have energy. The Arabians we actually agreed to sign like 20 gigawatts. And so far, we have reached the agreement that 30 gigawatts energy is there. Basically, looking forward to the Chinese market. While all this, the data centers actually would be happy to cooperate, and they will benefit definitely. There are a lot of advantages compared with other regions, you know. So this is one of the reasons I'm here actually, happy to talk about the equity investors in data centers. And so at the end, yes, Mongolia is very much committed. And I think after this panel, there will be the presentation on Mongolian investment, the policies and environment. You know, we are trying to secure this, the investment, the policies. Those who have invested in Mongolia will be protected, and there will be no change for a very long term. And the point, I think, Mr. Koppa mentioned is that, yes, we actually established this coalition government. So next 4 years, it will be very stable. And then after the election, there will be again coalition government, you know, because the rule of the game has changed. Before only 2 political parties ruled in the country, but now it has changed. From now on, there will be always the coalition government, and the policy will be stable. And in the long run, we will assure that all the investment you made will be very much secured, and definitely you will gain more, you know. So this is actual commitment by the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, one of the biggest hurdles for emerging markets is mobilizing international capital for the energy transition. From your perspective, what financial mechanisms are most effective in helping emerging markets to scale up investment? And are these mechanisms readily available in Mongolia?
No, thanks for the question. And there's sort of 2 ways to look at this. One is, I know because we discussed a bit these ideas of blended finance and different green financing. I don't know if we're under Chatham House rules, but so maybe I should ask. But I personally am very cynical of different what I call effectively marketing labels from different donor agencies, and they call them this, that, or the other. I mean, you can sort of dress anything up to make it what it is. So I would rather take the question, and I'll answer it, but I would sort of pivot it and say what's sort of important from a macroeconomic issuer standpoint in terms of what we're seeing. Because how we look at it, generally a client comes to us, they're the smart money, because they might be in Mongolia or in Brazil or wherever, and they're looking for, I mean, for lack of a better term, dumb money, right? They want money offshore that says, can we get some co-investment? And it's not really dumb money, but it's foreign capital. And so then it's a question of, okay, what does this opportunity set look like versus other opportunity sets in the energy space, in Mongolia, whatever it may be. So there's really a few things. And I was actually taking some notes this morning, so you'll have to excuse me for looking at my cheat sheet. But some of these I had heard, some of these I'd thought about, some of them I resonated with me this morning. Look, there's a few things that I think the government is already doing a great job on in terms of what's important to bring in and attract this international capital in terms of mechanisms. One is policy predictability. I'd say in terms of where the direction of travel is on the tariff, and then just on rule of law, that's already there. Second one that is critically important is just having local capital, and this applies anywhere, but having some local skin in the game, so to speak, is always important when we look at a transaction. You know, if I were to pick up on one that I'd say we've had more issues with in other markets within Mongolia, where I still see there's room for improvement, is on the foreign exchange market. We've had different issues just in terms of lack of capital markets functionality. We're working on a transaction where we're trying to get a fixed floating swap, and it's been a challenge. If I was in Kenya, we could go to Equity Bank and they could provide us a fixed floating swap. So that's one area, depending on what the ultimate transaction looks like, and what the currency is, what the rate structure, where I still see some opportunity. So I think those are the critical things as we look at, I think capital will be there if the transaction is marketable, and it becomes marketable if the return profile is right and these different bits and pieces are in place.
Thank you. Randolph, we talked a lot about like these financial mechanisms and how the abundance of renewable resources are super important, but it doesn't actually work. The change doesn't actually happen if the rest of the companies and the banks are not also involved and like into the mission. So I saw that recently TDB launched a green business loan and a sustainable finance framework. Has this helped build greater confidence among international and domestic players and strengthen Mongolia's commitment to a low carbon economy?
Well, thank you. Broadly speaking, it has. We introduced a sustainable finance framework, an ESG framework now over 12 years ago. And we've refined it. We've gotten the evaluations by the right organizations to be able to issue green bonds, et cetera. Some of it, as Andrew has said, are catchphrases almost, which you need to have. The lack of the local capital market, which was alluded to and which I mentioned, and again, there hasn't been this pension reform, and we can understand why. This was a nation of mainly nomadic herders that was almost not a cash economy, and so how are they going to be managed for their pensions, et cetera, and for other reasons. So that hasn't happened, and so we've had short-term money that we've been able to put out. We don't have local long-term pools of savings, and we've been able over the years to attract funds in the international market. I'm sitting here, people who have worked with TDB on its first issue, which is now 18 years ago, a small bond issue in the international markets. This was even before the sovereign issued. And that money was able to be put to use because of the growing economy. Now there's a lot of interest in Mongolia from investors. The debt markets have been very open to Mongolia. We've had a number of issues. We were able to issue last year. Our colleague Golem Bank, which is one of the projects, the conference sponsors, has gone to the market. And we've had a lot of interest of investors. Why? Because Mongolia has offered good returns, and it has good fundamentals, strong growth pattern, and all the other things that have been mentioned earlier. And of course, a lot of this we are trying to attract to help us fund our sustainable finance goals. As a bank, we are a little less than $2 billion in loan portfolio. We're a $4 billion bank. Our goal is by 2030 to have raised $2 billion of funding for sustainable finance, and $1 billion of that should be in renewable energy. So we're basically going to transform our portfolio to be dominant in what we would call sustainable finance or green finance. And we're partly on the way. We raised and issued a private placement for a 5-year fund of green bond and social bond last year, and we would look to do more in the future. We have a lot of demand. My colleague, before I left on Friday, said, we've used up the money we've raised, and we have more demand for funding, particularly on discrete renewable energy projects. And the good thing there is we don't necessarily have to swap the money into local currency, because the government is pricing it in US cents at the exchange rate at the time you deliver the energy. So you can sort of hedge your currency risk by lending into such a project. So it'll be easier to cost justify. We just need the longer tenors to be able to play a bigger role as a domestic bank and partner with the other longer term sources of funds outside.
Thank you. I think maybe we can have we're heading towards the end of the panel, but before that, Dorjkhand, I just wanted to understand better the role that domestic players play into this energy transition in the country.
Well, obviously, the government actually made very clear statement is that the energy sector has been controlled heavily by the state. And energy sector used to be like a natural monopoly, but now turned to be state monopoly, you know. So what our reform committee, what our government is keep the policy or principle is that let private sector do business in energy sector. No more intervention from the government side, you know. So that's why what we actually develop is very nice PPA and actually asking the funds, TDB, please go ahead. EBRD has been signed, they can committed like up to $1 billion, and the EIB also we are talking on it. And also all these banks, we are very much welcoming that. Please do the business because we are rich of resources and market is there. And also we are inviting this, the artificial intelligence or the technology companies or data centers, you know, we are creating the market. And as for the local players or both international, please welcome. You can be partner for the bigger size of projects, or maybe you can implement smaller size of project, off-grid, renewable project, you know. So we actually give a long-term guarantee that what is the price, how long, and as our panelists mentioned that, yes, the price of the renewables actually tremendously going down, and it is in terms of the funding and also in terms of the business margin, you know, it is so attractive. And so that's why a lot of the private sector is pretty much looking forward to invest in Mongolia. As I mentioned that a lot of, for example, Chinese companies out there, they say that, look, we are actually here and we do have experience. But while these Arabic countries actually, yes, we have also very good investment, both in China, in equipment of solar energy and also wind, etc. But the good thing is you are just next to the supply chain, it's next to the China. So the price of the electricity would be very competitive, you know. That's why they're very much willingly to invest in Mongolia. And also we're actually expanding our approach, not only China, but also the Korea and Japan and the East Asia, because they need the energy. And this is kind of talk is going on between the authorities, between the governments, you know, and this is the way how actually we're giving the chances to the private sector, both local and international as well. And this market is very low risk and long-term business, and long-term commitment has been secured by the government and both governments within the region. And so at the last, I would like to say that, yes, this is a good momentum that we are actually opening up the energy sector, and Mongolia is back to the business to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, just wanted to thank you all again for the panel, for the great conversation, and I wish that we can keep having a great event. Thank you.